Hello, friends. I'm Philip Magnus, and today I come to you with another sci-fi review. Is it Monday yet? Probably because I'm reviewing a sci-fi book. Of course it is. So, today, Leviathan Wakes. Leviathan Wakes, the first book in the Expanse sequence. It has been on the back burner for a while, and I do mean a while. I first started reading it circa 2022, possibly even 2021, something kept coming up and in the way of committing to this first novel in the series. Another book, a university course, personal stuff. Forward to July 2024. I'm set to read a 1200 page compendium on critical posthumanism, research for my PhD thesis. Yet PhD project. Let's not get ahead of ourselves right now. Yet I'm itching, and I do mean itching, for a good science fiction novel. The time's come. I boot up the old Kindle and read through this damned book in 5 days. And even then, I take that long only because I am super busy with work and life. The best part? Leviathan Wakes fits all too well with a lot of the literary theory I'm going over, which raises some questions. Well, at least one important one. Folks, do I need to change my whole PhD project proposal to include the expanse? Oof baboof. This is the kind of excellence Leviathan Wakes has reached. It's a modern masterpiece that will be treated as foundational to the sci-fi genre and spoken about not only in the context that you and I talk about it amongst our friends, among fellow sci-fi fans, but also among, I think, scholarship and the like. There are good reasons for that. The characters, at once unique and representative of the world they inhabit, the world itself, and an approach to it that's much heavier on the scientific aspects. The conflict, which works at the levels of immediate action, political intrigue, and incomprehensible alien threat. Lots of ground to cover, isn't there? Let me get started with the main point of view characters of this first book: James Holden, and Miller. I find their relationship one of the driving forces across the novel, and their personality is a constant cause of explosive interpersonal conflict. So who's one, who's the other? Holden is Earthborn, an inner, who has anything but your average childhood and Earth origins. He is the only child of 8 parents, 5 men and 3 women, gene spliced to be the offspring to all of them together. He grew up in Montana, I know, on a farmland, I know, several acres large, a kingdom in truth, something that's very rare indeed in the 24th century. He trained in the UN's officer school, is capable, if occasionally uncertain, and is said by several characters to be the closest thing to righteous in this part of the cosmos. There's a true line of deep, abiding idealism at the core of Holden, and it is made evident in the way he chooses to resolve more than one difficult situation that he finds himself and his crew dragged into. For Holden, visibility is key. Again and again, the reader sees him take up some truth he has uncovered and bring it from the shadow into the light of public scrutiny. In this way, Holden reminds me of the ideal Enlightenment subject, a human being who believes in what Michel Foucault calls the dream of a transparent society, visible and legible in each of its parts, the dream of there no longer existing any zones of darkness, zones established by the privileges of power or the prerogatives of some corporation, zones of disorder. This quotation is taken from page 152 in The Eye of Power. Holden insists on broadcasting the truths he uncovers numerous times across Leviathan Wakes. An early example, when he comes across a Martian battery in the corpse of a ship, the Scopuli, and the hauler he is second in charge of is annihilated by unknown ships. Holden immediately broadcasts his findings, in effect lightening the spark of conflict between the Belters and Mars. Similarly, the truth of the destruction of the Donager by unknown advanced ships is a powerful moment of truth, but it serves to obfuscate the true crisis at the heart of Leviathan Wakes and aids the antagonistic corporation Protogen, which drives so much of the conflict. Unintended effects hound Holden's choices throughout, but at the same time, Holden's intentions and reasons are persuasive in their idealism. To his credit, the man's dogged pursuit of the full truth does resolve much of the conflict his broadcasts play a part in unleashing. How it resolves it, and whether you agree with his methods, I leave to you. Detective Miller, meanwhile, is something of a pragmatist. He recognizes how the world works, recognizes too how the release of pivotal but partial information can be misconstrued in dangerous ways, used to excuse violence and open hostilities between the Inners and the Belters. With so much bad blood between the different factions, it almost couldn't be any other way. Such is the case his perspective makes. Miller is almost the opposite of Holden, more or less alone, disconnected from his fellow humans in ways that make him dangerous, volatile. As a cop on Sarah's station, he is comfortable with the arbitrary misuse of power. He is a corrupt has-been who oftentimes plays the cynic. Yet a case dropped in his lap, tailor-made for him to fail, awakens something in the detective and sends him on one of the most compelling character journeys I've read in recent memory. From the burnt-out, depressed wreck to something else entirely. I want to say a knight errant on a quest, a Don Quixote to match Holden's own, in his way. The conflict of these two characters is laid bare in a frank conversation that sees their viewpoints on truth fully articulated. One of the most powerful scenes in the book showcases the differences between Holden and Miller better than I ever could. It shows too what excellent foils they are to one another. One man who appeals to humanity's better angels. One man who has seen it at its worst and is willing to do the unspeakable, if it'll mean that he leaves the world a better place. Just even a little bit. Every page Holden and Miller shared together was a thrill, and never a cheap one. Their two viewpoints are quite different. Miller, a belter, picks up on Sarah's station. This is one of the largest belt stations, a center of this unique culture that is looked down on by the inner planets. His story has the feel of old-school detective pulp, especially early on. The difference is Miller comes face to face with a brutal realization of his own limitations as detective and human being. The kind that shows how much of an unreliable narrator he is. The early chapters from his perspective are cast in a very different colour after that realization, and would read in a far less flattering way on a reread, I suppose. Or rather, I suspect. From that point onwards, Miller's narrative becomes a lonelier, more cerebral affair. It is defined by long stretches of introspection, punctuated by conversations with acquaintances or even incidental passers-by, and short instances of brutal violence. Masterful storytelling perspective, the kind that underlines the world building. And I'll get to that eventually, I promise. Holden's viewpoint, far more colourful, That is owed no doubt to the rest of the main cast of The Expanse. Naomi, Amos, and Alex. Amos. If you've not seen the show or read the book, I can tell you without hesitation these are the quintessential sci-fi found family for me. Feeling the niche that the Millennium Falcon's crew does in Star Wars, frankly, quite a bit better than the Millennium Falcon's crew ever did. Or, for example, the Vulture God's colorful crew in Adrian Tchaikovsky's Final Architecture trilogy. I have reviews for it here somewhere. They must have appeared as if by magic. The trope is wildly popular in sci fi for a reason. You either get real close, real quick with the people you're spiraling across time and space with, well, only space, in a thin layer of metal that keeps the vacuum of space out, or you get dead. Naomi is a brilliant techie, the smartest person on board pretty much without fail, independent of who exactly she's on board with. Amos is an engineer without qualms or much of a conscience, who looks out for everyone like any big brother would, with the added advantage that he would shoot any threat dead without a moment's guilt after, long as he thought it was necessary. And Naomi or Holden gave him the go-ahead. Alex, meanwhile, is an extraordinary pilot, Martian trained and Martian grown, who speaks with an affected certain drawl. He's a lark, and the guy who makes sure the Rosie doesn't get blown up every 5 minutes that our crew of idiots is endangered. Together, these four are fire. It's beyond difficult to separate them in my mind from the actors who portrayed them on the show, so too with Miller. There's very little need for that. No need at all, in fact. The characterization on the show is faithful to what's on the page. There's a bit of difference in Amos early on, but in the case of the novel, it feels like the authors were nailing down his unique voice and character across the first third of the book. The show, having had a few books to work with, kicked into high gear with Amos at his most Amosy. Amos is, by the way, much more representative of the average Earther than Holden is, in at least one way. I've already mentioned the privileged circumstances of Holden's birth, adolescence, youth. Amos is from Baltimore, an orphan, someone for whom it's much easier to look without nostalgia at all the memories of Earth. And unlike in the first season of the series, Earth itself is inaccessible and far away. It's a world that is spoken of, spoken about in spades, but never seen up close. This will come later in the series. So, for example, we know that human population has ballooned to 30 billion. We know that real cheese is far more valuable than drugs on places like Ceres Station because chemists can cook up any kind of drug, but whole gang wars can be fought over a shipful of cheese, a commodity that is basically only made on Earth in the quantities necessary to export onto space. We know lots and lots of interesting tidbits, but veiling the Earth, keeping it at a distance from much of what's going on, was, I thought, a world-building strategy that paid off very well indeed. I mentioned also that The Expanse is known for keeping to a lot of scientific principles, even if some are theoretical ones, far better than many other sci-fi works do. There's a veracity to the world building, from the portrayal of life on ships and stations, to the politics that define human relationships in the solar system, to the values that Belters would have as opposed to inners. Chief among these are life or death needs, such as clean water and air filters, the kind of stuff that, no matter how bad you are and how bad the things you do not touch. Not if you're a belter, not if you want to be a live one, anyway. Conflict is a function of this principle. The belters have been forced to live at the margins of what's acceptable for the human. They've been exploited by the Inners for the mineral wealth they extract, while getting negligible pay for their labor. A story all this time. The Inners, both Earth, Luna, and Mars, have their own qualms, their own complaints, and issues with the lawlessness of the Belt and what they see as disloyalty. The whole thing is a vicious cycle, a vicious circle, perhaps, one that has already created so many fault lines by the time the events of the novel begin. Where there are fault lines at novel's beginning, cracks follow. The threat of the end of human civilization gains steam throughout. One of the most frightening figurative figures the narration returns to is the pebble. How a single rock could end Earth or Mars or Luna. Worse yet is the realization that all this conflict is the result of greed and the amoral pursuit of scientific progress, which makes any amount of life sacrificed irrelevant. Therein lies the scariest element of all of Leviathan Wakes, and a powerful scene clarifies the full horror of an uncritically posthumanist or transhumanist view that runs rampant where a certain protomolecule is concerned. The scene in question requires more nuanced analysis, and I'll see what I can do on that front if there's interest or time. Can you spot that scene? Let me know in the comments down below. Folks, I won't lie to you. Leviathan Wakes is a special book, and the opening to a series I expect will continue to take my breath away. I've seen the TV series, I know something of what's coming, but I have a great deal of excitement for the work of James S.A. Corey. Read it. That is all. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, the video and the channel alike, smash that like button, and of course, let me know what is your experience with James S.A. Corey's novels. Last time I reviewed his newest novel yet, The Mercy of Gods. I thought it was excellent, vastly different from The Expanse, but also with the potential to be interconnected to it. I'll say more about that at some future later date, perhaps around book 3, 4 onwards and outwards, but I absolutely cannot recommend enough that if you haven't read any of Corey's novels, start either here or start with The Wrath of Gods. Both are excellent. This perhaps this is the better entryway, just because there is so much of The Expanse out there. There's the TV show, there's 9 novels, there's comic books, and role-playing games, like almost 2 different editions. It's very exciting stuff. The Expanse is a universe that has really managed to, for me at least, breathe new life into the space opera genre. It has set a new standard. It has brought to life some truly amazing female characters. Naomi in the show, we obviously have Christian Avasarala, who I will speak about at length next week when I review the second book in the Expanse series. I'm looking up the name of... Good God, I forgot. Yeah, of course, Camina Drummer. Camina Drummer, how could I forget her name? She is literally my favorite character in all of the Expanse TV show. And she is just kind of special. A lot of these characters are. So that's all I have to say. I'm just rambling now, and I love to ramble about The Expanse, but I will cut myself off here and tell you, go read it, go read a book, any book, every book, maybe not every book, But I am Philip Magnus, you're not, and I will see you next time.